Welcome to this virtual business card interview, which is a collaboration between PCD Club and STAK to share with our community different members, their experience, thoughts on the market and opportunities on the STAK platform. So delighted today to be joined by Louise Creasey, founder of ADIRA Advisors. Welcome, Louise.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So it's great to record a discussion with you today. For those people who've not come across you before, it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your background and the company you set up.
Oh, okay. Well, I started my career, what it was actually Coopers & Lybrand at the time, now PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was advising private clients and corporates, which was quite unusual at that time because people tended to kind of specialise, which got me involved with a wealthy family looking after their private client taxes and the corporates. And unfortunately, he passed away, which led me to being asked to set up a family office in London, which I did, back in 2003. That covered quite a number of individuals, 2 branches of the family, quite a few generations. I think there was probably 70 by the time I finished. And the mandate was basically to provide a number of services, investments, tax, legal, philanthropy, as well as kind of looking after different entities, whether it's like operating businesses, investments, that kind of stuff. So pretty much the full suite of services. And over that time, I think we grew to about 15 or 16 employees in London. We had about 60, I think, worldwide. Very professional. Lots of work done on kind of family governance, succession planning, managing relationships and ensuring everyone has a voice, kind of coming up with a strategic vision for them of what they wanted their legacy to be, all of those kinds of things, really. So I was there for 18 years. I left last year in March and transitioned to the end of June. And since that time, I co-founded ADIRA Family Office Advisors with my co-founder, Richard Hughes. And he was also with a significant family. Quite a similar role to me in terms of looking after wealth generally, investments, finance. And our mandate really is to bring our experience, hopefully, to other family offices, just to give an independent perspective, sit on their boards, be used as an additional resource based on our kind of backgrounds. And also we've developed kind of an outsourced CEO role. So there's lots of families out there that have been interested in having somebody to have oversight of all of the different parts of managing kind of their wealth, their investments, legal issues, tax issues, but maybe not significant enough to have a family office of their own in terms of assets under management, or they just don't actually like that model. I think having different advisors, specialists in different areas gives you kind of a bit more breadth in terms of where you're going. And, you know, family offices, less so today, but they can be quite insular. Obviously, they're very kind of guarded on their information. So those were the kind of 2 models. Most of the interest that we've actually had is people actually wanting to set up their own offices, whether it's a full kind of suite of services or whether it's just investments. A lot of people interested in just the investment side, but becoming very niche, targeting a very specific area. So having their own teams in-house to do all the due diligence and kind of find targets themselves. Is that because ultra high net worth clients aren't getting the service they need from the private banks or the existing players that they feel they need to spin off, or they want to invest in different styles of assets they're not being offered? Why do you think that? I think it's a combination. So a lot of kind of new wealth comes from a lot of kind of individuals that are in finance themselves, kind of hedge funds, that kind of thing. So they've got a lot of their own experience and a very clear way of how they want to do things. And then there's others that are targeting very specific sectors, which are also combining with the ESG and philanthropy side of what they want to do. So what we tend to find at the moment is that a lot of families are not completely fixated on returns. They're much more into kind of looking at the meaning of their wealth, what they want to kind of have an impact on, what they want their legacy to be, and trying to kind of branch out into different areas, especially bringing next gen involved. They have very clear ideas often about what they want to do and have very strong views about, you know, climate change or government policies, those kinds of things.
Do you provide some sort of mentorship to these next gens? Because if they're let loose looking at investment opportunities, they might not actually have the skill set to really appraise the good and the bad.
Exactly. And that's kind of part of the remit in terms of talking to families about what they want to achieve and how they get there, what involvement family members actually want to have day to day. And it can be a combination, you know, they can learn as they go by having experts around them. And, you know, some of them have become very successful in terms of knowing their sectors very well, just from being involved on a day-to-day basis and being guided. Others don't necessarily have an interest, and, you know, they want to have their own career in their own path, whatever that may be, setting up their own operating businesses and kind of using their contacts and stuff that way. So it's a whole variety. And that's why I think it's really important that, you know, if somebody says, I want my own office, it's basically starting with a blank piece of paper and saying, well, okay, why? What is it you're trying to achieve? Who's involved? How do you want it governed? You know, what's the best practice in terms of how it can be structured? And that can be a combination of things, of doing things in-house with people and obviously outside service providers, and bringing in people that have the expertise as and when required.
I mean, might you create family charters and documents and bring, I suppose, the family together around ideas?
Yes.
Is it?
So very early in my kind of transition into the family office space, we developed a family credo with family members round tables, putting on paper, you know, their values or what they wanted to achieve, you know, being stewards of their wealth and passing it on to future generations. And you know, those things are kept under review because things change as you go through the years and the next gen kind of get older and want to participate more. So absolutely, it's very much kind of trying to find out, well, what are you trying to achieve here? And again, as I said, it's not just about we want returns of X, Y, and Z. It's, well, actually, we'd quite like to have an impact in this space. And, you know, the children are very interested in making a difference here, whatever that may be. So philanthropy is obviously quite heavy in those discussions. I have a keen interest in that myself. I've kept a lot of my kind of charitable trustee roles that I had previously and also added to them by having a bit more flexibility on my time.
Has COVID sort of driven a bit more of that, do you think? Do you think it sort of brought it more to the surface, that there's you know, people struggling out there that need support and wealthy families in a position to help?
Yeah, I think it's kind of two-pronged COVID. It had an impact in terms of, you know, my experience of my kind of family members that I had and also other families that I know. For the first time in their lives, they weren't able to travel. And, you know, lots of them are international and they move around on a really regular basis for business or other reasons. And, you know, they were in one place and it made them stop and think and, you know, have time on their hands where they could actually deal with things and think about things. So within that, there's obviously a lot of kind of generational change in terms of succession planning, a lot more kind of family conversations about transitions of wealth. Lots of people also thinking about bringing forward liquidity events as a consequence. And then obviously the big question as well is that, well, once the liquidity event happens, what are we going to do with this money and how do we want to kind of invest it or, you know, get involved in the charitable sector? So I think it was a whole combination of thinking that actually time is precious and also seeing people in kind of hardship and with real need. So yeah, I think, as I say, the landscape for me has certainly changed when you talk to wealthy people that think that they can actually have an impact and make a difference. They want to get involved in lots of different things.
And I guess also on the business side, it's prompted families who were in asset classes before that they thought were just extremely robust, commercial property or other sectors they didn't think that were going to be affected. I suppose it's brought forward their conversation to appraise, are we positioned correctly? Should we be more diversified? Should we be exiting a business that has actually made the traditional wealth of the family? So it's at a time of inflection, isn't it?
Absolutely. And there seems to be quite a big shift, a lot more interest in alternative investments, increasing the allocation there, obviously liquidity and lots of other factors to be considered, but a lot more interested in that kind of area. I think a lot of families shied away from that area, considering it more risky previously, but that seems to have changed. Also a lot more interest in just deploying capital into direct investments. And that's where I kind of said about, you know, people recruiting their in-house teams to do research and target things themselves in specialist areas. So yeah, a lot more thinking about, okay, what are the opportunities out there and where can we find them? And I think the lines in terms of investing especially with direct capital, that people are kind of looking at sectors, very much kind of more grey lines between the ESG side, the philanthropy side and the investment side. It seems to be more of a combination. It's not just about the returns anymore.
Okay, interesting. And I mean, the pandemic's changed also the way a lot of professionals interact. So previously, people relied a lot on the conferences, trade shows to get together, share knowledge. We're both involved in the STAK platform, which is a kind of disruptive way of combining professionals and helping them connect.
Yeah.
What is it about the platform that you like and caught your eye when you were originally looking at it?
Well, I think working in a family office, especially on an international basis, I guess what it taught me is, most family offices are dealing with big, serious issues. A lot of it's problem solving on a day-to-day basis, and often projects have short time frames, etc. So over that period of time, nearly 18 years, you develop I guess I call it like a black book of contacts, of people that that you can trust and that are good at what they do and are specialists. And, it's not so much, say, in the UK where lots of people and reputations, but if you go across kind of different jurisdictions into kind of little areas, whether it's, a Swiss canton or, you have a little planning issue in Italy or something, you need to know these little specialists. And often they're small, one-man, one-woman niche kind of firms that, they're not on LinkedIn, they're not marketing themselves, they're not necessarily well known. And so you build up this kind of network of people that can help solve your problems. But people don't always have access to that. And that's what I like about STAK. It's a confidential platform in that you don't have to reveal everything that you're looking for, because your name doesn't have to be out there. Before you actually get on it as a platform, you've been kind of reviewed to make sure that you're genuine, etc. And, it's all kind of above board, so that it's a professional kind of environment, I guess. But it means that you can look for things or look for bespoke things, a direct investment in a certain sector that you might be looking for example. And then hopefully the more people that are on there, again, tested through reputation and knowledge, etc., it will bring people together in a efficient time frame because it's quite quick, no cost, effectively. And these are tried and tested relationships where you hope that, there'd be real value added. And it just takes away a lot of work, maybe in tender processes, or, you're on the phone to your contacts going, do you know somebody that might be able to help with this? So yeah, it's a way of kind of widening your market access effectively, which I think is invaluable these days.
Because it's a fragmented market as well, if you think about it, between, say, even like London, Channel Islands, Isle of Man, Switzerland.
Yeah.
There's lots of specialists operating there, and actually they want to access and share knowledge, but they only want to do that on their terms, because otherwise they, don't want to be inundated with advisors trying to sell them something. So I think that the technical, like the technology provides that portal through which people can interact on their terms, isn't it, is one of the things. Yeah,
and also, you become aware of opportunities that you wouldn't necessarily become aware of. There's things on there in terms of, you can invest in things, for example, that was helping climate change in terms of materials available and for designers, because they don't necessarily have that access or knowledge within their own businesses. Lots of kind of lending requests in terms of, not necessarily your standard terms, but still very profitable if people are willing to kind of go outside the parameters, right through to looking for new trustees. We had one, I think, where somebody actually wanted to recruit somebody, and it's not a recruitment platform, but just because of the network within it, they were able to find somebody really quite quickly. So yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of development in terms of going across jurisdictions in the future. But for me, concentrating on the family office side, as I say, I think it's invaluable. You wouldn't go to LinkedIn, for example, and say, does anybody know that I can have this person, we're looking at investing in this sector, because you want to keep that confidential. You don't want to kind of air all of your information. So it's a nice, discreet way of doing it, but knowing that there's lots of professional people behind it.
And what do you think the trends going forward in the family office sector are going to be in some of the key areas? I mean, you mentioned around investment, more operations setting up to look at that, or specialising on governance? Or what do you think is going to drive change as we go forward? How's the sector going to respond?
Well, as I said, I think there's been a lot of concentration in terms of succession planning. Obviously looking at alternative ways to deploy capital from kind of the usual diversified kind of portfolios that you see. I think beyond that, from a personal point of view, I think there's more work that can be done in making sure that they are governed correctly. There's a lot of money that goes through family offices, and they're not regulated in a traditional sense. I mean, there's certain things that you do where you have to be regulated by, the FCA, and, depending on what you do in-house and how many family members you have, GDPR and Criminal Finances Act, all of those things. But I think it's important for certainly heads of family offices to make sure that the procedures and transparency and involvement of family members, and things like risk registers, for example, are a good idea in terms of making sure that people are always being proactive and not reactive to events as they happen. That said, I don't think anyone had COVID on their risk register, which obviously had a huge impact. But yeah, I think, as I said, looking at them and making sure that they're run correctly and they have oversight, and, that they don't do everything necessarily in-house and look inwards, that they should be kind of getting out there and seeing what's going on in the world and making contacts and networks. And
COVID's changed a lot of working practice. So whereas before someone might have had a townhouse in Mayfair as the kind of HQ, what do you think on that? I mean, there's definite value in the privacy and confidentiality of having an office environment to work from. What do you sense family offices are thinking of in that? Are they fully adopting remote working and dispensing with the physical property? Or
I think it's a mix.
Yeah.
And, from my experience of the offices that I know, they are very sophisticated in terms of their IT and their platforms. And so they adapted very quickly to the work from home and COVID issues, etc. But I think the ones that I'm also aware of, the majority of them are back in the office or heading to go back into the office pretty much full time, maybe, one day a week at home or something. And I think, that comes from, yes, everything ran great during COVID, things got done, but you lose that collaboration or, just sharing of ideas on the spot that isn't prearranged. I think if you have face-to-face conversations, much more comes out of it than if you're kind of on a Zoom screen. So I think a lot of people will still keep those offices.
And are there threats in the sort of cyber technology world that you come across family office operating without the sort of safeguards in place, or are people well equipped in that sphere?
I think it's a huge spectrum, and it's an area when I say that reviews in terms of best practice should be looked at. You have people that use certain IT systems and then adapt them to kind of suit their needs. The bigger offices, they build their own platforms that are completely just bespoke to what they need. And then you have offices that are still operating on Excel. And that's a concern because, you need review processes, but, you can get a formula wrong and all of those kinds of things. But, having sophisticated systems similar to kind of banking standards is very much in place in the bigger offices. But as I say, everyone says a family office, but they're all so different. They have a different number of people, they have different skill sets within them, they do different things depending on whether it's in-house or outsourced. But I think there's certain fundamentals that should always be looked at in terms of governance process, segregation of duties, review procedures, and things like IT systems and making sure they're secure is really important.
Okay, and finally, professionals who are looking at the STAK platform or have heard about it and are looking at it more closely, why would you recommend them, have a closer look at the platform and what it might do for them?
Well, I think it's two-pronged, really. On the one hand, being involved in the platform, you can see opportunities for more business. lots of different things come up in terms of, banking and credit to professional services, whether it's trustees, legal, right through to, setting up new structures. So fundamentally, you can get new business as a way of doing it. And I think on the other side is, most clients these days are coming with very unusual scenarios that they want advice on because the world's changing. And, if you have a trusted relationship with a client and you're in tax or you're a lawyer, if the relationship's trusted and close, they always come to you to ask for advice and say, who would you recommend? I need some help in this area. And so that's also a way of being pointed in the right direction. And it may not just be one provider, it could be somebody could give you 2 or 3, and you go through the process. But it's just a way of networking and building knowledge and, adding value to your clients, I think.
Okay, great. Well, look, great to talk to you today, Louise, and we look forward to sharing this with our members.
Thank you very much.